What happened to Alfalfa after the Little Rascals? Our gang, which is more widely referred to by some as the Little Rascals, was essentially produced between 1922 and 1944 as a popular series of film shorts. The shorts were centered around the adventures and misadventures of a group of youngsters as they navigated through their youthful days. This was a revolutionary program because it featured both blacks and whites connecting and operating as equals. A sum of 41 child actors were featured in The Little Rascals. Many expected that the show would launch some huge careers. A number of the stars ended up quitting showbiz early on, while others fell on hard times, with the most renowned star being Carl Dean Switzer, who so ably brought the role of Alfalfa to life. Aside from Alfalfa, who's arguably one of the most favored and most successful members of the gang, included among the popular characters were Darla, Buckwheat, and Spanky. Alfalfa was played by Switzer from the middle of the 1930s to the 1940s. The Our Gang films were turned into a tremendously popular TV series known as The Little Rascals in 1955. However, no royalties from the show were ever paid to Switzer. The emergence of Alfalfa in show business. His face was generously freckled, his voice was squeaky, and he had a cowlick that was out of control. In addition, he had a personality that was incorrigible. When Alfalfa comes to mind, the imagination conjures up images that make joyful feelings flow. His appearances in Our Gang have firmly cemented him in a memorable part of film history. The story of Alfalfa is shrouded in adventures and has its share of complexity as well. His baby photos thrilled generations of youngsters all across the United States and half the world over. He was a head taller in comparison to the rest of the Our Gang stars, and Alfalfa was a skinny boy who had a yo-yo for an Adam's apple and a trained voice that could sing off-key consistently while he blew bubbles and crossed his eyes. Whatever the mishaps of the adorable ragtag gang, Alfalfa, with his banjo eyes, played them around a childlike screen crush he had on Darla, the 4-year-old dynamite kid. Darla responded in kind, and the series became a massive hit. By the end of 1937, the Alfalfa character, as portrayed by Switzer, had surpassed in popularity the nominal star of the series, George Spanky McFarlane. The two boys got along quite well, however their fathers constantly argued over the screen time and salaries of their sons. Among the Our Gang actors, Tommy Bond was Switzer's best friend. Tommy Bond played Butch, who was Alfalfa's on-screen nemesis. Bond has been noted as saying that he and Switzer ended up becoming good friends because they couldn't replace each other on screen because they played opposite characters. However, Alfalfa was known for being difficult and abrasive on the set. His co-stars have given accounts of how he would frequently play cruel jokes on them and would even delay filming to do his antics. Where it all began. Born in Paris, Illinois on August 8, 1927, Carl Dean Switzer was a bundle of joy for George and Gladys Switzer. They already had a son, Harold Frederick Switzer, who would have roles in films with his little brother as well. These little boys were an incredible sensation and would sing at various functions in Illinois near to their parents' farm. On one occasion, while visiting their grandparents in California, Harold and Carl made the decision to audition for the popular Our Gang series by Hal Roach, which he began producing early in the 1920s as silent films. However, they had some challenges getting onto the grounds of the studio without a pass. So the two stood outside the commissary, and amidst the midday lunch crowd, they started singing. The commotion caught the attention of Hal Roach, who immediately secured the Switzer brothers for the Our Gang comedy, Beginner's Luck, which was fittingly named 1935 short. Alfalfa was 7 years old at the time. In the gang, he was first nicknamed Hayseed. However, Alfalfa was the nickname that stuck. Hal Roach Studios was a production company that produced film and television shows. It was named after the well-known Hal Roach, who was instrumental in launching the careers of Laurel and Hardy and other comedy legends. The Ride to Fame. Within just a few weeks of being signed to Roach, Alfalfa proved himself as a remarkable talent, a vibrant mixture of talent and personality. His flawless handling of the dialogue was blended with a most distinctive penchant for impressively showcasing his vocal abilities. Every song he belted out was given a new meaning, and he was well received by his fans. Alfalfa has country roots, which certainly influenced his initial appearance in Our Gang films. However, he soon undertook a distinct persona as a smooth, wisecracking youngster. His typical costume was a three-piece suit, fedora hat, and a necktie. His style of singing also evolved over time. He veered away from the country boy hillbilly tunes, instead going for the dubious rule of crooner. Doing this was so poignant and quite brilliant comically, since his squeaky voice suddenly transformed a romantic ballad into something of a comedy frolic. Between the years of 1935 and 1940, Alfalfa made appearances in 61 Our Gang comedic films. The images from those appearances are unforgettable. His dreamy entanglements with Darla, his comic escapades with Spanky, his rivalry with Butch, and his love for the movie-going community. His character was definitely impactful, and his screen image in those Our Gang adventures will seal his immortality. But what happened to Alfalfa after The Little Rascals? The declension of his career. As is inevitable with child actors, there came a point when Alfalfa became too mature in appearance and voice to act in the Our Gang films. His final appearance was made in 1940 in a short titled Kitty Cure. His desire was to continue acting, however, he encountered the challenge of typecasting. He was viewed as that wild kid with a chunk of hair standing on end who crooned with a squeak. The powers that be were hesitant to view him as an adult, and this resulted in a tremendous deal of disappointment for Alfalfa. He had a great deal of challenges finding employment. He had a lot of appearances in some B-movies and bit roles, in films such as Pat and Mike and State of the Union, both with Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy. He was also featured in My Favorite Blonde with Bob Hope, and a series centered on the Gas House Kids, which saw him reuniting with his fellow Our Gang actor Tommy Butch Bond. In addition, Alfalfa has a cameo in the classic It's a Wonderful Life, which is among the most popular movies of all time. During this time, Alfalfa turned to television and did some stints there. Between the 1952 and 1955 years, Alfalfa was featured on The Roy Rogers Show 6 times. In addition, he guest starred in one of the episodes of Science Fiction Theater, an American science fiction anthology show, and he also appeared on the George Burns and Gracie Allen Show. Between 1953 and 1954, Alfalfa co-starred in 3 films that were directed by William A. Wellman, The High and the Mighty and Island in the Sky. John Wayne was the star of both those projects, and he was also on Track of the Cat, which starred Robert Mitchum. In 1956, he co-starred in Dig That Uranium, which is a film by the Bowery Boys. This was followed by a small part in The Ten Commandments as a Hebrew slave. The Ten Commandments is a Cecil B. DeMille film. The final film role for Carl Switzer was in The Defiant Ones, which is a 1958 drama. However, no matter how hard he tried, Alfalfa couldn't escape the shade of his Our Gang role. It was an immense disappointment for him and his fellow child actors, having to stay perpetual teens and not being allowed to truly experience the usual process of becoming adult actors. Added to this was the fact that the producers he would approach for a job would always request that he do off-key singing for them. This was a massive source of frustration for him. Alfalfa was forced to balance this level of annoyance with the reality of needing to make a living. There was no doubt that his most successful era in Hollywood had passed. His occasional acting jobs were supplemented by working as a bartender and as a big game fishing and hunting guide in Northern California. On those expeditions, his customers included famous individuals like Henry Fonda and Roy Rogers. The misfortunes of Alfalfa in the 1950s. At the close of the 1950s, terrible events unfolded in the life of Alfalfa. He was married for a short period of 4 months to Diane Collingwood, with whom he had 1 child, but they quickly divorced. His ex-wife remarried and raised their child without informing him of who his biological father was. It's been reported that after his marriage failed, similar to his career in Hollywood, he turned to abusing alcohol, and this contributed to him often running into trouble with the law. Alcohol abuse seemed to have played a role in his ultimate demise as well. In January of 1958, the unfortunate actor was shot and injured in front of a bar by an unknown attacker as he was getting into his car. The perpetrator was never identified or arrested. Fortunately, it was a flesh wound and Alfalfa survived. Later on in 1958, he tried but was unsuccessful in killing himself. Alfalfa was also known to have numerous run-ins with the police. He worked in Sequoia National Forest as a guide and was once arrested for chopping down Christmas trees there. The actor, who just couldn't seem to adjust to an unexciting adult life, followed his early years of success, paid a fine of $225 after pleading guilty to the charge. He was placed on probation for 1 year and handed a suspended 30-day jail sentence.